I need to preface this by saying that my husband is a good person. He is a wonderful father and an amazing partner. He is a hard worker and just really wants to do good work. His problem is that he's a smart guy with lots of ideas and steps of people's toes too much. I am looking for advice on how I need to better approach these conversations with him because I am starting to feel myself pull away from him. Before this last crazy year, my husband worked 4 years for the same company. He jumped ship after he was looked over for a promotion and pay raise twice. We both knew he was taking on a certain amount of risk, but he landed a contract to hire a job at a big company where there was a lot of resources available for him to succeed. So we were not worried about it. A few months after he started complaining about his boss. He complained about how he hated being a clock puncher, complaining that his boss was never around and she did everything wrong and everyone seemed okay with the status quo. I encouraged and supported him as best as I could, while encouraging him to continue to apply for other jobs and interview while he still had a job, just in case he did not want to stay there, or they did not convert him to full-time after his contract was over. Long story short, he did not keep his head down and search for other jobs, and one misstep later, his boss terminated his 1-year contract after 6 months for conflicting management style. I worked in HR. I know what that means. His next contract gig lasted him a week, and then he approached me with the idea of not going back to work full-time, but starting his own company. It would mean spending all of the money we had saved on a down payment for a house to support us and his business during this time. I made him promise he would try and seek gainful employment while trying to launch his startup. He promised and then never delivered. He did not look for any other jobs until after he was turned down for venture capital on several fronts. He landed another contract gig after we had depleted our entire savings and racked up $10,000 in credit card debt. This new job was also a 1-year contract to hire position. The company was going through a restructure, so all he had to do was keep his head down, do a good job, and work hard. Instead, he tried to change the way everyone did things, managed to get into a pissing match with a female employee who was BFFs with his boss, and sure enough, he was called into her office after only 6 months on the job and fired. I am at my wit's end. I am furious and angry at hurt. How hard is it to just do your job when you have 3 kids and a wife at home? How hard is to stop assuming risk when you're already in a vulnerable position? I am in school right now, and I work 25 hours a week. We have 3 kids at home. We are also in escrow on our very first house after rebuilding our savings from last summer. Unless he starts a job next week, we are going to lose our house and we have to be out of our rental in June. Maybe this is just an anomaly. I don't know. It feels like a pattern to me. When we met, he had been laid off from his employer, and the job before that he was fired after only a few months. The only long stint he had was the 4 years at the larger company, and he complained about that constantly too. I am at my wit's end. I came home from work today, and he was eating ice cream sandwiches with 2 of our kids. I asked if he had followed up on any of his leads from last week. Nope. I tried talking to him about how he comes across to people, arrogant know-it-all, when he walks into an office and tells people they are doing things wrong and tries to make a bunch of big changes. I tried telling him he needs to find a good balance between being a leader and being a good employee. I spent a decade in HR. This is valuable knowledge that I am bringing to the table. It seems to fall on deaf ears. Reddit, what do I do? I don't know how to handle this situation anymore. I don't know if this is a pattern of behavior or if this is just a run of bad luck. How do I stop hating my husband for being perpetually unemployed and putting our family at risk because he can't get his shit together? Relevant comments. Most comments were pointing out he had problems with women telling him what to. Commenter. My brother is exactly like your husband. But you know what? My brother can't get a job to save his life now. It doesn't matter that my brother is smart or a good father, because he's been fired from every job he's had in the past 3 years. He's been unemployed for 9 months, and he places blame everywhere but himself. He is unbearable. He's a know-it-all. He's dug himself into a hole I'm not sure he can get out of, honestly. He couldn't even rent an apartment without a co-signer because of his work history. Why hire the guy that's been fired? Why hire the guy that can only provide references that are 5 years old? You don't. Your husband needs to address his issues with a therapist. His inability to deal with authority, especially women with authority, including you, is going to ruin him career-wise and potentially marriage-wise. Commenter. I don't know, it feels like a pattern to me. I noticed another pattern. The gender of all the people at work he can't seem to get along with. OP. It's something I considered, but dismissed for whatever reason. The job he was at for 4 years, both of his supervisors were male. He has a very dark history with his mother. But why wouldn't he display any of those behaviors with me, or our daughters if that were the case? Commenter. Your daughters aren't in a position of authority over him. The opposite is true. He tells them what to do. As for how he acts toward you, You've just told us that he doesn't want to do things your way, even though what you're suggesting is what is logical and necessary. Silly woman. You can't tell me what to do. I'm the one who know the right way to go about things. Opie, you're absolutely right. He always says he's receptive to my input, but never actually seems to implement it. Except the one time he did take my advice and he landed an amazing job that paid him Zoodles, and then he got fired. But, I'm just a woman. Commenter. Actually, he does display these with you. That's why he spent your savings and racked up $10,000 of credit card debt. Commenter. I noticed something similar with my fiancé, though not as extreme as your situation, but nonetheless I noticed it right away when you mentioned he has female bosses. My fiancé also has no relationship with his mother, and they have a terrible history. After he told me stories of past employments and issues he's had, I noticed and pointed out to him that he has issues with women in positions of authority, that he doesn't take my advice/suggestions even when I am knowledgeable or experienced in the topic. He also has the habit of not listening to me when I give him information, and then magically my info is valid when it comes from someone else, a man of course. So irritating. I also made the connection that I believe it has to do with the dysfunction between him and his mother. We were able to deal with those issues by going to therapy. We go together, and we go individually. There will be nothing you can do on your own because you do not have the proper training and tools for him to deal with his issues. Suggest therapy. You cannot allow him to put your family in financial jeopardy. That is not fair to your children. It's something I find very unsettling about a person, with a family no less, who sabotages their job before having another already lined up. Do not buy a house just yet. There are things that need to be worked on before you put your family in a worse situation. Also, Mother's Day is approaching, and that is a tough time for people who have very dark histories with their mothers. Just something to think about because my fiancé and I struggle this time of year for similar reasons. Small update. First, thank you everyone for your input. I took a lot of the advice here into the conversation that I had with him last night, once kids were settled. Points I took away from the chat. He does not feel like he has a problem with female bosses. He thinks that shitty companies and shitty management is the problem. He does not know this, but he made a comment about his job hunting that did not make sense. A recruiter had reached out to him specifically about a less than desirable job. I asked if he followed up. He said yes and that he never heard back. I snooped through his email. He never replied to the woman. He also had a recruiter contact him this evening asking about a position about a company he had specifically mentioned would not be ideal to work for. I told him it wasn't like we had a choice. He just needs a job right now regardless. So, he's lying to me now. He's acting like he has all of the time in the world to find some magical match for him on the employment front. Update 1. Hey guys. I got an inbox full of requests for an update, and my original post got a lot more attention than I thought it would. So I figured I would post an update. Unfortunately, my update is a sad one. We are going on week 5 of my husband's unemployment, and he still has no job offers. He has had several prospects, quite a few phone interviews, and exactly one in-person interview. As of right now, it's not looking like he will be back to work even in the next few weeks, despite having promised me every week for the last 3 weeks that he would have a job offer. If he doesn't have a job offer before Wednesday, we will lose the house. To try and prepare for this, we filled out a bunch of rental applications because we have to be out of the house we are currently living in less than 3 weeks. All of our applications were denied as my husband has no income. So it looks like we will be living in someone's basement in short order. Several people mentioned me going back to work full-time, and sadly, that is not an option. My company isn't in a position to make me a full-time offer and won't be until midsummer. I've had this conversation with my boss. My job offer is contingent upon my continued studies, so school isn't something I can just drop right now. Based on the advice I received here as well as from a close friend, I have tried to approach him several times about what the problem could be, or how we might try a different way of figuring this out. Every single time, I was met with being accused of stressing him out, making him anxious, and eventually getting blamed for being the source of his nervousness, which he later said affected how his phone interviews went. I have asked if he has followed up regarding certain opportunities, and he tells me I am making him anxious asking for updates so often. Yesterday, in fact, he told me that no one gets a job by following up with recruiters. I understand how recruitment works, but I have to ask myself how someone can dedicate the hours of 9 to 5 to getting a job in a highly in-demand field in an area that has jobs aplenty and still come up short. One in-person interview? I've asked him to forego applications on websites and reach out to these hiring managers in person, or on LinkedIn, or anything but the conventional means of being hired. Nope. Probably the most infuriating thing that has happened has been a warm lead on an opportunity. The COO of a small company reached out to him regarding a job that was a job title below the job he was working at previously. He was recommended to this COO by a former coworker of my husband's, who works at the company currently. In the course of a month, she reached out to him 6 different times by email. He never replied to a single one of her emails. Not even a "thanks so much for considering me" type thing. He told me he didn't respond to her because he didn't have to, and that he checked them out on Glassdoor and the reviews say it is a bad place to work and that they pay below market rates, so it would be a waste of his time. At this juncture, I am not sure what to do about my marriage. I am having a hard time focusing on work and or school right now. I am eating everything in sight and I am trying to pack up a house that we are going to end up putting into a storage unit, and I have had actual nervous breakdowns 3 times in the last 2 weeks. That, and the neighborhood gossips have caught wind of our hard times, and now that there is blood in the water, they are circling. I don't want to break up my family, but I don't want to be married to someone I can't rely on anymore. Even if he did save the day and get a job in the next week or so, we could be in the same position in the not-so-distant future. I've already told him I'd like to go back to counseling as soon as we have access to the funds, or benefits, or both, and he has agreed. But I have no idea if this arrogant, entitled attitude towards work is something that is so deeply ingrained that it can't be worked out. I've had enough instability in my life, and I kept hoping that my marriage and our family would continue to be a source of stability, and it is not. I had more stability when I was on my own. It is a sad day when the saying, "the only person you can count on is yourself," really rings true. Relevant comments. Commenter: I am so sorry. Perhaps this may be a good time to have a trial separation. You and the kids can stay with a friend, but they won't have room for your husband. See what life is like when you don't have to manage your husband's life for him. Opie: I know what happens in that case, because I cleaned it up when we first got together. About a year into being married, all of a sudden his paychecks stopped getting deposited into our joint account. He contacted HR, and as it turns out, his wages were being garnished for unpaid medical debts before we were married. This happened 3 weeks before Christmas, and I had to cash out a 401k to cover us until I could figure things out. I had to get in touch with the garnishees to figure out what the damage was, submit the paperwork they needed to come up with a payment plan, and do all of the legwork. He was at work. He didn't have time. When I went down the rabbit hole, it wasn't the only debt, and long story short, he had to file Chapter 13. I handled the bankruptcy, and he went to the 2 meetings he had to attend in person that I could not go to on his behalf. A year after the bankruptcy, I had built his credit back up. He had 2 unsecured credit cards in his name, they stay in my wallet, and a credit score of 650, which isn't great, but it is better than what it was before the bankruptcy. So yeah, I know what happens when I am not handling everything. Commenter: What I got out of your update is that your husband would rather make you and the kids homeless than get a new job, and wants to take 0 time to reflect upon what went wrong. His warm lead is a hell of a lot better than most people have, and it beats being homeless. You really need to think about walking away from him. I got the impression that he dislikes female bosses. I'm afraid he might be resentful if you become the breadwinner. At the very least, I could see him staying unemployed, chasing dreams that don't pan out while you bust your ass. Commenter: You can't be fudging serious. This is too predictable. It's too predictable. I'm so sorry. You married a brat. He can't bring himself to respect a female superior enough to save your house. He ignored a sure fudging thing because it just wasn't up to his princely standards. God damn it, OP. This guy is dead weight dragging down your whole life. You know in your heart that this isn't sustainable. Commenter: I remember last post people had pointed out the fact that all the bosses your husband had issues with were women, and I see this trend continues with the COO. I'm very sorry about your situation. I think the best thing you can do is leave him and stay with family or friends while you finish schooling. Update 2. Hey everyone. I'm back with another update. So, after my last post, things took a turn for the worse. My husband still didn't have any job offers. We were down to the wire. Wednesday came and went, and as I feared, we lost the house. It was like a gut punch. I couldn't even process it properly because we had to pack up and move out within days. We ended up moving into the basement of a family friend. It's cramped, and I feel like we're intruding, but it's better than being on the street. The kids are handling it better than I expected, but I can tell it's hard on them too. They miss having their own space. In the meantime, I've been working overtime trying to salvage our situation. I applied to every temp job I could find, hoping to scrape together enough to keep us afloat. My husband, on the other hand, seemed to be sinking deeper into his own world. He's been avoiding conversations about his job search, and when I bring it up, he gets defensive and blames me for stressing him out. The breaking point came last night. We were having dinner in the basement, and I casually asked if he had followed up on any job leads that day. He exploded, yelling about how I don't understand the pressure he's under and how I'm making everything worse. Our friend's kids were in the next room, and I could hear them go silent when he started shouting. After he stormed out, I sat there, trying to hold back tears. Our friend came in and gave me a hug, telling me that it's okay to feel overwhelmed and that I shouldn't have to shoulder all of this alone. She suggested that maybe my husband and I need a break from each other to figure things out. This morning, I told my husband that we need to separate for a while. He was shocked and angry, but I stood my ground. I told him that until he gets his act together and starts contributing to our family, I can't keep doing this. It's not fair to me or the kids. He's staying with his brother now, and I'm here with the kids. It's hard, but I already feel a little lighter. I've scheduled a therapy session for myself next week to help process everything. I've also started looking into government assistance programs to see if there's anything that can help us get back on our feet. I'm not sure what the future holds. Maybe this separation will be the wake-up call he needs, or maybe it's the beginning of the end for us. All I know is that I have to protect my kids and myself. We deserve stability and happiness, and right now, I need to focus on finding that for us, with or without him. Thanks again for all your support and advice. I'll keep you posted. Update 3. Hey everyone. I wasn't planning on updating so soon, but so much has happened in the last few days that I need to get it all out. After the separation, I thought I'd finally have a moment to breathe, but life had other plans. My husband called me 2 days after moving in with his brother, saying he had a lead on a job and needed his suit from the house. He sounded desperate, so I agreed to meet him. When I arrived, he looked disheveled and not like someone ready for an interview. He admitted he lied about the job lead, he just wanted to talk. He apologized for how he's been acting and promised to do better. It was hard to believe him after everything, but I told him I'd support him if he showed real effort. He stayed with his brother and, to my surprise, started attending job fairs and workshops. He even went to a few therapy sessions. For a moment, it seemed like he was genuinely trying to change. But then, things took another nosedive. While at work one evening, I got a frantic call from my husband's brother. My husband had been arrested. Apparently, he got into a shouting match with a store manager over a return policy, and things escalated. The police were called, and he ended up spending the night in jail. I had to bail him out the next morning, which was money we didn't have. When I picked him up, he was a mess. He was apologetic, but also full of excuses. It was the manager's fault, he said. He was just having a bad day. I listened, but I was exhausted. I told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions and stop blaming everyone else. Back at the basement, I had a serious talk with him. I told him that I couldn't keep living like this and that he needed to focus on getting his life together. I suggested he stay with his brother longer while he figures things out. He agreed, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. As for me, I've been trying to keep everything together. I managed to secure a temp job that gives us a bit more income, and my classes are going well. The kids are adjusting, but I can tell they miss their dad. I've been trying to keep their routines as normal as possible, but it's tough. The final straw came yesterday. I got a call from my husband's therapist. She wanted to discuss his progress, or lack thereof. She mentioned that he was skipping sessions and not engaging in the ones he did attend. She suggested that he might need more intensive therapy and that I should consider what's best for my mental health and the kids. Hearing this was devastating. I had hoped he was on the right path, but it seems like he's slipping back into old patterns. I'm at a loss for what to do next. Part of me wants to keep fighting for our marriage, but another part is ready to let go and move on for the sake of my kids and my sanity. I've started looking into more permanent housing solutions, and I'm considering legal separation. It's a painful decision, but I need to do what's best for my family. I don't want to give up on him, but I also can't keep sacrificing our well-being for his mistakes.